This meeting is being recorded and calling like a motion to call it to order at 6:05 of the Dartmouth Broadband Exploratory Committee. I need a motion.
Motion to
Open the meeting.
Open the
motion to
meeting.
open the meeting. My apologies.
No worries.
Second.
Second. And roll call vote. Actually, we need to start with the roll call vote. Go ahead and just announce names and move along.
John Collins.
Aaron Cadju.
Chris Oliver, yes.
Peter Chase.
Kevin Estes.
You don't need to do
So
a
we
roll
have
call vote for the-
we have a motion, second, and vote.
We don't need to do a roll call because there's nobody on Zoom, so everyone's in person.
Oh, all right.
Just a regular vote.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah. Great. Meeting is in progress. And let's take a look at the agenda.
I have reorganization of the board on there. We can hold on that until after, or, next meeting or after entry point if we want.
Okay. Yeah, we have the entry point guys here, so let's start out and
So at the last meeting that a couple people attended, we had the first draft of the proposal. I think I forwarded you the second revised copy that we had some comments. So I think the entry point team's just gonna go over the couple of comments we had, the changes they had. If any of the members that weren't here last time have questions, we should ask entry point, but we can go from there. So Eric, we'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, I need to get access to that. I don't know if I'm able to have that. I just sent a request. Or if everyone has it open, I can just tell you page numbers and we can do that way as well.
There you go.
Got it? Okay. Thank you. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
yeah.
Do I need to make it bigger or is it good?
Bigger would be better.
So, bigger. There we go. Good. Okay. So there weren't a lot of edits that we had to the report, but I will go down the list of what we have added or changed in here. One of the things that was added was trying to, I guess, word better that this report, I'm going to go to the financials, was while the BRE study was not based off of the entire town premise count, that the financials were based off of. So these are the numbers for the entire town. And I have down here, let's see. I believe it's right. Yeah. Okay, the design was then projected out for the whole town of 11,718 passings, where we're using a 50% take rate from that to show these numbers. But this is just to make sure when someone's reading this document report that they know that even though the BOM was only the 5,791 premises, that the actual financials are for the entire town. So those are the numbers that you are seeing. And so when we get to actual costs down here, this is for the entire town, the new costs that there are, if you were to build it out, which I believe is what was asked for last time. Correct me if I'm wrong, and we can change that in any way.
No, I believe that was right.
Okay, perfect. And as well, we had some other things that we had to work on in the financials. All of those numbers have been fixed. So all of these numbers are correct that we're looking at here. You have in your reports. And then as well, I did send out the BRE study for everyone. That was one of the other requests. Is there anyone who does not have it that would like access? Or Peter, was that all figured out? Does anyone not have access that needs
Did
it?
everyone receive emails and get?
I did get it.
Okay, perfect. And then as well, moving down to the market analysis. Before we were not able to get pricing for FiOS because there was not pricing in town. But I was asked to get pricing to show what their costs are right now in Boston. We can see what they're charging people, and they would be similar. And so we added in what they're paying there. They're not the exact ones, obviously, that you have because we haven't seen those yet. Those might actually be updated now. This was done in August. But as of right now, this is what they're being charged in Boston. So we have that in the market research as well.
And that's business or business pricing, or is that resi?
That's business pricing. Right here's the residential pricing.
Got it.
So I
Okay.
also have what we could get from Verizon,
Mhm.
which is their 5G, the pricing that we actually saw right now, but then also what they're charging for FiOS in Boston for residential.
Got it. And just for the purposes of anybody that might be looking in on this meeting, can you explain the difference between the two types of networks, Ethernet and XGS-PON?
Yeah. Devin, could you touch on that?
I can. So Ethernet is essentially a design of a network where you essentially have it's considered a non-shared network, meaning everybody that is connected to the network, each home or business, each resident or business, there is essentially a fiber strand that runs back to a central hut and plugs directly into a switch because it's a switch network. Okay. Under the XG-PON network, it uses what's called a passive architecture. And what happens is the fiber strand runs back to a central location. It plugs into what's called a splitter, which then splits. It basically splits a single fiber strand into multiple endpoints, if you will. So whereas one is well, let me give you the best illustration. One is a switch configuration and the other is a bus architecture configuration. So the best way to probably illustrate that is if you go to an airport, right? And you have, at least the airports that most airports have in their major walkways or major, terminals, they have these kind of escalators, but they're floor escalators, right? They're just kind of traffic, right? And a bunch of people get on that and they can be transported through the terminal. But if a lot of people get crowded, it's possible, but enough people get on those things where they kind of get crowded and people kind of can't get past, and sometimes they're not as efficient as they hope to. Okay. That's an example of a bus architecture. Okay. Now, the way you solve for that potential traffic jam, if you will, is you make a really, really wide escalator and a really fast one, right? Now, the other option is a switched architecture. And in a switched architecture, that's like the train that goes between terminals, right? Where you'll typically pull up to where you get onto the train to go from terminal A to terminal B. And there'll usually be 4 or 5 doors that open really wide, and you get 4 or 5 people going through each door simultaneously. And then everybody gets on the train and it whisks everybody down. And then everybody opens those doors and everybody gets off those doors at the same time. That's more of a switched architecture. Okay. So essentially, Ethernet purists will say that's by far the best way to build and architect a network. And the XGS-PON guy says, well, yes, that may be true. However, it's not the most economical way to build a network. So do you trade off the economics of building the network and the infrastructure cost, capital cost of that? Do you trade that off for, the bus versus the switched architecture? And that's really the decision to be made, right?
Got it. Thank you.
I will tell you, just as a side note, 99% of the fiber networks in America are PON networks. Most of them are not XGS-PON because XGS-PON is relatively new, and XGS-PON does solve a lot of the congestion problem that has been historically plaguing traditional PON networks. Okay. So that's why, you know, as of late, we've been kind of identifying, not necessarily recommending, but we've been identifying both architectures as viable options because they finally got to a place technologically to where bus architectures kind of solve some of those challenges they've had historically. So anyway, any other questions on that?
I got a question, Devin. Chris Oliver here. How are you?
Good.
So you may have, I wasn't here at the last meeting and I've looked through the report. There's a lot in the report. My question to you is, could you explain to myself and anyone watching regarding if we're looking at future-proofing the network as much as possible and looking 30 years down the road, is there any difference? You know, should we take that into consideration as far as one network versus the other? Future-proofing.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. Here, and the best way for me to answer that is, if you go to any data center in the world, you will find one architecture, and that's Ethernet. You will not find PON architecture.
Okay.
In fact, at both ends of the PON architecture, it converts the signal to Ethernet, and that's what the homeowner plugs into, and that's what the central switch or routers plug into, is an Ethernet, you know, signal basically.
Yeah.
And that's because everybody on the planet, every manufacturer, every technology developer develops and manufactures equipment compatible with Ethernet. It is a standard that is globally recognized. PON is a standard recognized, but in the PON development world. Does that make sense? So you definitely have specific manufacturers who manufacture PON equipment. And historically there's been some real challenges with cross compatibility, meaning if you implement a Calix PON network, well, guess what? You're not going to take an Adtran piece of equipment and plug it into that Calix network. Just not going to happen. It's not going to work. Okay. So even though they follow this standard, there's enough uniqueness between the manufacturers to where it does make it difficult to avoid vendor lock-in. Now, again, some of those challenges are starting to be solved with XGS-PON. Okay, there's a lot more cross compatibility now. Okay, that's again one of those things we never felt comfortable recommending because we knew that there would be inevitably vendor lock-in. And whereas you do not have that, there's so many manufacturers manufacturing Ethernet equipment that it's all cross compatibility. So from that standpoint, I think PON will get there, but right now they're not quite up to Ethernet. So if that's important to you in the future, that may be a consideration. Also, right now, and again, this is a way futuristic thing, but right now, you know, XGS-PON, they're doing, you know, you can easily do 10 gigabit networks because the switchers are doing 25, you know, gigabits, right?
Yeah.
But in an Ethernet network, they're doing 156 terabytes.
Right.
And so they're way ahead from a pure capacity perspective, just on the electronics piece. But again, that's probably going to catch up pretty rapidly. So I don't think you're gonna run into a problem either way. But those are probably the two things I would consider most if you're looking at that, you know, hey, look, what about the future? What about compatibility? Those are the two things I would look at.
All right, great. And my last question is, what types, I'm just curious, like, what is a FiOS network? Is it an Ethernet network or is it a PON network? Or is it either?
Well, traditionally, those are all PON networks. I haven't heard of a single fiber network, especially deployed by a large telecommunications company like Verizon, that is not PON based.
Okay.
Google Fiber is kind of a hybrid. It's kind of a unique hybrid PON system that they developed. But most people, I don't know this for sure, but I would anticipate that Verizon is using either a Calix-based system or an Adtran-based system. They could be using another manufacturer, but
So that's just the manufacturer, like I'm familiar with Cradle Point or Sienna. Is that just another type of manufacturer?
yeah, those are probably the two largest manufacturers in the world of PON-based equipment.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions right now? Perfect. And then as well, the last question that we had was regarding, it was more looking into next steps. And it was on to more visibility into where you go with different design processes after this. And so we have our section here of different RFPs that you'll go into after the design, engineering, materials, and construction RFP. I hope this answers what you were looking for, Peter, but I believe this is the question that you had for us.
Yeah, I think it's just something that the committee needs to know, like where to go from here.
Yeah.
You know, I know one question that needs to kind of be answered, and the committee will talk is you know, the financial aspect of it. You know, as I think we talked a lot at the last meeting that, you know, there might be some grants, but you know, it's still a large expenditure that, you know, for us to dive in more, I think, you know, we need to have the backing of everyone in town saying that this is a good idea and we want to spend $40 million on this, or you guys are crazy and, you know, we can't spend $10 on this. So I think, you know, just having this information for the committee to know, like, something to kind of follow is good.
Yeah. Perfect. Yep. And there's, of course, plenty more information in the next steps. And so if you have any other questions, though, that covers what we added into the report after our last meeting. Are there any other questions anyone has right now while you have us as well? Peter, I was going to ask, I believe we do have a meeting that Jeff said he would come out for. I don't know if you have anything in mind where we could
Take that up to the committee also. I didn't know if they wanted to try to get something in before the
Okay.
holiday. Or, you know, my suggestion was, you know, to them is going to be, maybe we should wait until the beginning of the year
Yeah.
and get something on the books, you know, towards the beginning of the year, just so it doesn't get all wrapped up in the hustle and bustle of the holidays. You know, because I think our next select board meeting that we'd be able to get on isn't until mid-December. And I just feel like that might be a little bit too close to everyone's busy season, that it just doesn't make sense.
which that you can let us know about. There's no rush from us. So
And we can work with you guys too. Like, I obviously, if, you know, Jeff's coming out here for something else to do some other work somewhere else, we can time it around that schedule as long as it's within, like, you know, a month or so.
perfect. Perfect. All right.
Sounds good.
Anyone have any other questions for them before?
I guess I just have one question. And when I was looking at the BRE report, it looks like there's a good portion of the south part of town that was not included in that report. Is there a reason why that area of town was excluded? Or am I just not looking at that properly?
I can tell you that we, like, I tried working with the committee, it might have been right before you got here,
Mhm.
that we were trying to figure out the best bang for our buck. So we were trying to go off of premises counts
Okay,
in like certain areas, but we were trying to get as much as we could get north-south. But I don't think we went all the way down south because we just figured by that point, the numbers weren't there for the amount of premises per mile
okay.
down the road. Like, we tried to get as many premises in that we could
Okay.
within a constraint, so.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions for them? No?
I'm good.
All right, I think we're good with you guys. You're welcome to hang around, but I think we're gonna talk about trying to see if we can figure out the next steps and when we wanna try to get this out to the public, so.
Okay. I
Thank
think
you
we'll,
for your time. Have a great evening.
yeah, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Let
Thanks,
us
guys.
know if you have any questions, just send me an email. We're happy to answer
Sounds good.
anything. Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so I think the big question is, first question I would say is, when do we want to try to meet with the select board? That's when we talked about having the person from Entry Point come in, kind of make a presentation on the plan. And then present it to the select board and to the public. At their meeting, because those usually get the most kind of views, and we can use the big meeting room and invite everyone to come, but, you know, I think when we had our public launch of it, we got about 20 people, so there's a lot of people that watch it after and commented on it, but there wasn't a lot of people in. So,
I think we should wait till after, get on the select board after the first of the year. Set up a meeting before that, is just my opinion, for us to meet again.
everyone kind of.
Agreed.
I would
Agree
agree
with
with
that.
that. Yeah, this time of year's
So what I can do is I can.
wrangles people.
Yeah, and then also I just feel like the general public, it'll give us a little bit of time to push it out, so I'll try to look for something in mid-January. I'm not sure their schedule. I'll also look at the school committee schedule to figure if we can figure it off on an off week that you guys are not meeting on the same nights.
Oh, yeah, well, is it,
And then also planning board,
yeah,
yeah, so.
but we're every other Monday and
Yeah.
select board is every Monday, so.
No, they're every other Monday too.
They are?
Sometimes sometimes they
Yeah.
coincide, sometimes they don't, yeah. so-
Okay,
So we'll look, and we should be able to find a date that we can all kind of agree on. And then the other thing is I can ask him if we can do, like, you know, if I have to do it on a night of a planning board, maybe I can get it for like 6 o'clock instead of 7, so this way you could get out in time for
Got
the
it.
planning board or something.
Yeah, and I could leave early if I needed to.
So, but I can work with the co-administrators on that. And then the other group that I would say we definitely want to invite at some point, the town has a long-range planning committee.
capital planning?
Capital
Yeah.
planning, so I think having them at that meeting also would be a good thing. So, you know, whenever we get in front of the select board, try to invite that group to attend also, so we can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone, so at least they hear about it. They might ask to have someone go to one of their meetings at some point to discuss it more in depth, but they're the ones kind of looking at the long range, planning.
Is this a document that we can broadcast out?
At this point, I don't see why we couldn't. Like, I think we could publish it to our website. I could work with the town's press, the communications coordinator. And we could, you know, put up a press release on it and push it out. In the meantime, people can review it and submit questions if they have. As long as the committee's fine with the way, you know, maybe we should vote on accepting the document as is. And then this way we can put it up to the website. And I did renew the website for another year that they did for us. So at least for the next year, we'll have the same URL.
Was it Dartmouth Broadband or?
Yeah, I gotta look at it. I
Okay.
forgot what it was, but, so that's been renewed for a year. And then maybe after that, we'll see about just incorporating it into the town's webpage provider. After that, going forward.
Okay, so you get a motion to accept the feasibility study?
Motion to
As
accept
it is.
motion to accept the feasibility study as presented.
In a second? Okay, and vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So one follow-up that I have is, if you weren't here in the last meeting, maybe you caught wind of it. We have pretty good, have it on pretty good, reliable information that FiOS is going to be coming to town. I'm trying to figure out what that really means to our efforts here. And how that would balance with owning our own network. The timeline, according to the grant that FiOS has, Verizon has applied for, and on good word, I have it that it's been granted, is the job has to be complete in 2 years. So conceivably, 2 years from now, we could be dealing with a very different landscape. So I want to throw that out as a talking point and see what you guys think about it.
So yeah, it's certainly a concern when you look at the build costs for either of these networks, and this was unanticipated, I think, when we first started all of this. I can tell you that I know that the town of Bourne on the Cape FiOS just completed. They just rolled it out. They hooked up all their town buildings to FiOS already. Anything that had any kind of copper lines for telephone lines, and that they're offering it to all the residents, and the pricing is pretty close to this. So it's certainly a concern with the amount of money that we're looking at for the build cost for these projects, as well as the competitiveness that would. We know Verizon, sounds like we know, we're pretty sure that Verizon's coming. So it's going to be close, going to be very close price wise as to what the town could offer.
Yep, and it's a lot better
thought I'd seen
bandwidth
that day.
than cable. It's a shared fiber network as they were describing. So it's just a different world compared. Not only is it symmetric, meaning same speed up versus down speed, or downstream, but it's just a much better network than coax. So I think it poses a significant downward pressure on people that want to stay with Comcast for whatever reason they have. There's going to be a lot of downward pressure on the pricing, and hopefully maybe some increased service levels and responsiveness, but who knows about that? But certainly there's going to be an option as it come, at least as we've, that's why we have an empty seat here. One of our board members her job became a conflict of interest because they're building here. So it is pretty reliable information that we're going to be getting FiOS. So that's something that we should, as we think through this study and how we present this study, I think we should also roll out that this is coming down the pike.
So do you know if Bourne is rolling it out like in piecemeal, how they're rolling it out in?
So
Bourne?
they completed the backbone. The backbone was done. All
Through the
the
whole town?
Yep, throughout the whole town over the bridges. And they're hooking up, they're offering in the services to residents now they forced anyone still on analog or copper telephone lines, which I believe Dartmouth still has around.
Yeah.
To fiber. That was you had to do that. There was no, they shut down their copper analog network. So they did that. And they're offering the services for anyone that's interested in just purchasing the internet, if they didn't have a copper line before, that's available to them. And yeah, and it was probably about a 2-year project.
Yeah, because I mean, that's my concern is, I mean, obviously. The town's probably not big enough for 3 providers, like, to be honest, like, you know. But, you know, I could see Verizon, like, I know from what I heard was that, you know, a large portion of their grant was between New Bedford and Fall River, basically. And so, but by chance, Dartmouth and Westport are in between. So if they're building 2 large networks on either end to go down in the middle, you know, they can pick it up pretty easily when they build the head end and build it out. So, but my concern is that they were only stay like towards the kind of branch off the Route 6 area, like the main thoroughfare areas there, and not get to like way down south or way up north. And where we know the population density is a lot less per mile for, you know, them stringing cable up there. So I'm hoping that they plan on doing the whole town. But
Yeah, and I should say that I don't know what the penetration rate is in Bourne as far as if it's 100% offered to all
Yeah.
the residents. I can't speak to that.
So when you say the backbone has been run, if a customer purchases FiOS, then they come out and they bring it from the pole to the house. That's what they're doing now
right,
as customers sign up. So do we have, is there any, any kind of schematics or anything yet from Verizon on how much they're going to come into town?
Good question, and I don't know yet. But I think that's a pretty key question to ask. But I do know that everywhere in the Verizon footprint, they are migrating from, you know, companies and businesses, residences off of copper and onto fiber networks, because they are, as you mentioned, they're decommissioning copper everywhere they can. Some other carriers just have basically said, hey, we're decommissioning this copper network, and not even offered an alternative. So the copper networks are being decommissioned throughout the country. Our copper will eventually go. And for that reason, I think that my guess is that if they're going to be in the town, then they're going to do the whole town, because they want to shut down the copper. They're just really not a marginful business product anymore, and they don't want to invest new dollars in old technology. So I will take it as an action item to see if I can't get some clarity on that. And if anybody else has a way to double check what my findings are, I'd welcome that.
I might be able to find something out.
I mean, the good scenario here is that, you know, town government works slow. And so we could continue the process going forward. You know, you're not looking at any votes of town meeting or the general public, depending on how you're going to fund this, for, you know, a good year now, you know, because it's something that would have to go to the town meeting, have to go to the voters probably as some kind of override vote or something. So you're not going to get it on for April election this year coming up. You know, the earliest you'd be looking to try to go for funding would be April of 2026, probably. So I think by then also, if they have a 2-year time clock on them, that's already started, my understanding, it's already been kind of ticking. So we should sometime next fall see, you know, if we're seeing Verizon trucks all summer long out on the roads running cable, then we know they're in business, right? But,
Running fiber.
right, running fiber,
Not
right?
paper.
Yes. Then we know that they're truly going down every road before they announce it, you know. But I think, like I said, I think Kevin and I have had this conversation. He said, you know, I think the next right thing is to go to the select board, you know, have Entry Point do a little bit of a show and tell on their suggest, their presentation of them. And then we can follow up and say, that we have heard when that Verizon's coming in, and that's a concern to the committee. And to see how that's gonna play out. But on the other hand, I think it's, we also have to gauge the intern, like I said, to Entry Point. I think we need to gauge where the policymakers are as far as this, looking at this and figuring out where it aligns with in the town's needs and wants. Because, I mean, if no one can tell me where the $40 million is coming from, then I don't see why we should continue looking into it. I think that's that's the big question is where does it fall in the priority? And if it's something that they're willing to back and push for, then, we can keep the train going until we get otherwise. But I think that's because I was asked by a select board member what I thought, and I told him, I said, well, I don't live in town, so I can't tell you the town what their priorities are. I said, I just know, like being at all these meetings, that there are a lot of priorities around town that I completely agree with. Somebody's got to rank those priorities and say, I mean, the one nice thing is there's somewhat of a dedicated funding source for this project.
Right.
It would be the people using the system. But in the long run, if Verizon does overbuild and then you don't get the 50% take rate, it might fall back on the taxpayers at some point, because the town's still gonna have to foot the bill for laying the fiber.
Right.
across the town. So,
Now, does this conclude our agreement? The business contract with
with
Entry
Entry
Point?
Point, so the last thing is they're supposed to be in person to do a launch of the study.
Okay,
And so that's what we were talking about doing at a select board meeting on a Monday night. So this way we can try to get people from the general public that want to attend. Also, it kind of puts it in front of the select board from Entry Point. So that'd be a little bit better, than us just presenting it to them. Like, so if they have any questions, any technical questions, it'd be great for them to be able to answer it. But once that, like, they're 99% of their work's done except for that one part.
got it.
So, and that's why going forward, that's why I asked for the next steps, and I didn't really read much of the next steps, but I looked at it close enough that, it talks about the next steps for us, if we wanted to move forward, would be doing RFPs, doing IFBs or whatever, to go look at that next step of design. Because again, these are still, they're good numbers, but they're not exact numbers. Like, we still got to drill down further to get and I think that's where you get into, you're gonna hire a project manager, you're gonna hire a consult, like an architect / engineer team that would design it all, do all your bid specs. That would be kind of the next low hanging fruit to bite at,
Right.
which I think the town could fund something like that with some kind of like just regular CIP money, or, maybe even, I know they still got a little bit of opera money left over that is kind of unrestricted, that they got we got a little bit left that we might be able to grab some of that to do that type of, like, get it to that point.
Would this qualify for an application to CPA or
It would be CIP. Yeah,
CIP?
capital, well, CIPC, I think they call it now, Capital Improvement Committee.
Okay, but I mean, the next stage of the study.
Would be a capital expense, yeah.
Okay, but I'm just wondering if that would fall under the Community Preservation Act,
Oh, yeah, I don't
the
think,
CPA funds,
I don't think.
Buddy
that
Baker
would.
Smith.
Yeah, I don't think that this would, because I couldn't see. I mean, the one thing that I think Jeff from Entry Point talked about, that Westport was looking to the USDA for some kind of grant for the rural areas of Westport. So, and supposedly, I think at our last get together, which was a couple months ago. He said they should know more within like 6 months. So I would assume sometime over the first of the year, they might see where that's gonna fall. He said that he had a lot of conversations with people at the USDA and they were very interested in it. And so, you know, they were looking to do it in the rural areas to try to get, you know, the farmers, that need the service way out.
And I'm talking, and I just want to make sure that I'm being clear. I was talking about getting to the next stage of the next step of feasibility, not using money to build out the whole thing.
Right, yeah,
Okay, just,
yeah, just to get the
Wanna
harder
make sure
numbers,
that
the closer
we're-
numbers in the next, yeah.
um,
I mean, I have seen that entry point with every town that they've worked with, like once their contract is kind of finished, they still kind of sit in and, you know, we'll talk, you know, I know Fairhaven had, and even Westport, I think, both of them use them to do feasibility studies and they still sit on their meetings from time to time and kind of give a expert opinion here and there. So they're always, you know, talking with them. So they don't seem to wipe their hands of you once you're done. You know, they're not gonna do a lot of heavy lifting, but they'll
Right.
give you their expertise
Sure.
and like some suggestions here and there.
got it. Anybody have anything more you want, that, any questions or items or points, opinions about, the report as it stands that we've accepted? No? Okay. Okay, so reorganization of the board. We have an empty seat and we don't have a chairperson.
Correct.
So does anybody know anybody that might be interested? And I don't think they need to be a technical person to be on this, but it might help if they have some industry exposure. So if you know of anybody that might be interested to get their name on a committee. As far as a chairperson, does anybody want to volunteer? As the temporary chairperson that I am today?
I'll nominate you.
I will tell you that with Saul, it was a very easy lift. I would send him everything and he would just say yes. So, you know, I do, you know, it's not, it's really just, a lot of it is just running the meeting. Like, honestly, it's, you know, I usually try to get the agenda in front of the chairperson beforehand to say, are there any tweaks? And once in a while, he made a suggestion to add something or delete something, but for the most part, our agendas are pretty standard and so I don't think it's a lot of lift outside of the meeting. It's really just running the meeting, a lot of it. And being at some point, probably the spokesperson for the group, you know, when we go in front of the select board. All 4 or 5 of you shouldn't get up and talk. It kind of one person would get up and kind of summarize what we've talked about and. So. You can put it
The
on.
motion on the floor.
Accept it.
Can you vote somebody in if they vote no? All right, I will, go ahead and put my name up.
Okay, I think Chris made a motion. Somebody
Yeah.
second it.
Second.
Vote.
Aye.
Aye,
Hey.
I
Aye.
appreciate that.
Okay, then, next steps, by next steps on the agenda, you really, we're just talking about, okay, where do we go from here? And we've kind of already talk through that a little bit? We
I
have some
think we're gonna look for, to try to get
significant
this.
question marks.
Yep, get on there for the select board meeting and then, to present the plan to them
Mhm.
and then hopefully get some feedback from them on where they think we should go. I think, after entry point kind of gives them a little presentation. I think that's when you can walk up and ask them for what they think our next step should be, now that this plan is in front of them, and how, what do they think as far as the funding for it, and is this something that the town wants to try to move forward with or not?
Mhm.
And, hopefully they'll give us some direction at that meeting to say, yes, go ahead,
Yeah.
Well,
I do think that a lot of this just hinges on what's Verizon's plan.
That's huge.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That could scuttle the whole thing. Possibly.
Well, I agree with you in concept that Scuttle might be I think it would be really a great thing if they covered the whole
Of
town,
course.
just because we wouldn't have to pay for it. Because I can tell you right now that there are a lot of big bills coming up that, we're gonna have to take a deep bite out of the apple. And putting big numbers like this up at this time. Not a lot of stomach for it right now, I don't think. So that's really a vital piece of information that we need. So I'll let's just shake the tree a little bit and see what we can't find out. Items not known 48 hours in advance. Any other questions about what we're doing here or anything going on?
No, I'm good.
Anybody else planning on dropping out? Okay. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. I can't make it.
So moved.
There we go.
Okay.
And I count on eyes all around.
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
awesome.